And now I would like to present Margaretha Rossholm Lagerlöf. She is a former professor of art history at the Stockholm University. She has retired, but she continues to work as a tutor for PhD students, and she has kindly agreed to conclude this symposium for us. So welcome, Margaretha.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me and for this greeting. As you might well understand, it can't be conclusions. That's quite impossible. I would have to digest for a long time all those specific merveilles. And it takes a generation, maybe. I'm too old for that. Yeah, maybe I could start by telling you a little bit what I do at the university, so you might understand why I'm standing here, actually. I'm more or less retired, but rather less than more, I would say. I'm engaged by the Vice-Chancellor of the Stockholm University and her staff to develop plans of how to engage the art world and the university together. So this is a case in point for me. So I'm very excited about the whole event, actually. But I will not give conclusions, obviously. Rather, I would just like to give some reflections inspired by your detailed and very well-informed exposition of meanings and know-how in the examinations of Marcel Duchamp and his oeuvre. For me, it has been to be in a universe, in a creative universe, where I'm the stranger, actually. I come in as a stranger. And I would say that that's not against Marcel Duchamp's intentions. Somewhere he would need a stranger as an observer. So what does it mean to be a stranger then? I have been experiencing this universe, the detailed, enormous immensity of this creative world. And I sort of resist it, and resist your learned exposition as well, maybe. I want to scan interpretation. Interpretation is always embodied, as it were, in the face and shape and utterance of the work, both the work of the artist and the work of the interpreter. But I want to step back and ask about the nature of the claims. What are we claiming, actually, and what are the arguments? And how exactly do we know what we know? For me, being in this creative universe, it has been like witnessing in a succession of events, very quick and very alarming in many ways. So when I draw back and look for the claims, I ask myself, is that question at all relevant in the case of Duchamp? How could you ever corroborate or make sure that you know what you're talking about, actually? I mean, what are the arguments? So I have to summarize in my mind the key situations of what you have been exposing here. And in those cases, we have the creative work of Duchamp and an interpreter, a very learned or knowledgeable interpreter who is actually listening viewing, searching. You are now in the second generation, maybe the third generation, but we have the phantom or the presence of Ulf Linde, maybe the first real interpreter. So what is the relation like between them? Well, I've come to think about that relation as a dance. Mostly it has been described as a chess play. But I think that would be too regular in a way. There are rules to chess play, even though you can apply them more or less skillfully. But I see it as a dance, more or less. A dance where one move invites the invention of an answering move. But, and this is a creative act, of course. Does that make the interpreter an equal of the artist? Or in what way are they different? They have different tasks, and obviously there are rights and wrongs in these moves. Surprisingly, you might object. We know that Marcel Duchamp had done away with almost all the codes of art: originality, origin, creative gesture, authorship, truth in relation to an artistic idea, and so on. But then, in the second move, the play, or rather interplay of truth and doubt, come up again. They are directing our attention to the question of secured meanings, or maybe secured meanings. And in another direction, the artist, as creator of the work, vanishes again, just to reappear, claiming a dialogue, to be seen and understood by the chosen interlocutor. It's as if he wanted both things to be possible, being without truth or corroboration or validation, and relying on them, secretly maybe. One has to be aware of the basic structures. There are interpretations that can be better than others. And better in what sense then? This difference is of great, great importance. The interpreter refines the suggestion of meaning, getting nearer and nearer. Each time the tries can be changed and refined and getting closer with each improvement. But there is always room for a better exposition, a rethinking, a more refined and informed rethinking. Can the interpreter come to the end of the meaning potential? No, absolutely not. The depth will not be measured. The work always promises new beginnings and maybe an unfaithful accordance with another interpreter. The artist and the interpreter need each other to achieve fame. The fame of the one is grafted onto the other. The nature of the relation between an interpreter and the artist is trust. And the subsequent interpreters, after the death of the first generation, they also have to engage in interplay where there is trust, but no guarantees. Is there truth in the interpretations? Or is a task similar to an interpretation in the sense of translation? We were into that yesterday about the French-Swedish problem or idea in relation to translation. In translation, there is never a total match. There is always loss of meaning and guessing to some extent. We have heard that in the presentations that the idea of translation in language was of great importance in the relations between Marcel Duchamp and Ulf Linde, to begin with, just to name the most important of the relations. And Paul, you answered, I think, yesterday, what is the best artwork? And you said it's Marcel Duchamp. So he created himself in a way as a machine to be used and loved and kept in many ways. It was said in the first day also that everyone has his or her Duchamp. So it's like a favorite artistic device to huddle with, turn around, use, almost in an erotic way. And he would comply with that. Sometimes during these hours here in the Moderna Museum, I have been thinking of other strategies, artistic strategies from art historical cases. For instance, in Italian culture of the 16th century, around the mid-16th century, there emerged a style among artists that were revolutionary in a way. They were repelling, they were ugly, they were scornful. They were attacking holy images with irony. They would even show the pubic hair of Christ, etc. So really revolutionary in many ways. And you could never get hold of the real stance of the artist, because in a way they were hiding behind this mask of irony. And behind that mask of irony, they could be completely at peace with themselves. They could never be touched beyond that. So it's a strategy to be famous, to be rebellious, and yet go back to your inner self, to be at peace with yourself, to be left alone. I think that was also I've come to think during these presentations that this idea could be interesting for Marcel Duchamp as well. We knew from the first exposition that he was involved in the surrealist movement, the ideas about sexuality and eroticism. And there was some disappointment that when Étant donné was shown, that maybe he wasn't that courageous as he would have appeared when he was Eros c'est la vie, with his feature as a drag appearance. And maybe he would just repel that comment by double negations. I don't know. And behind those double negations, he would be at peace with himself, alone in his creative area. Well, that will do for this time. So thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for all the substance that you have given to my appreciation of Marcel Duchamp. So thank you.